Welcome to Debating Metal. As always, I'm Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, and my co-host is Chris Kaye. Today we're doing a worst to first episode, and we're going back to just before Black Sabbath. Now, who came before Black Sabbath, you ask? None other than Led Zeppelin.
One of the two bands known as the Godfathers of Metal, as you mentioned, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin amazingly only had a 12-year career. Though they ended the band after the untimely passing of drummer John Bonham, Led Zeppelin had a monumental career, releasing 8 studio albums, 4 of which went diamond, a collection of leftover tracks, 4 live albums, and various compilations reaching heights most bands only dream of. On this episode, Kenneth and I are each going to rank their albums from what we think is their weakest all the way up to what we believe is their very best.
But before we begin, I just want to remind you that if you haven't done so already, please click subscribe or like on your favorite podcast platform and get our new episodes as soon as they're out. So now sit back, relax, and turn it up to 11 as we give you Led Zeppelin worst to first. Chris, Led Zeppelin, man, we don't talk much about them. We did I think their greatest hits around episode, I think it was episode 102 way back in the day. This was like 4 months ago. And you know, they don't get a lot of hype on our show, but they definitely are one of the most influential bands to a lot of musicians that we listen to on a regular basis. Just put it that way.
And I think that's mostly why we don't talk a tremendous amount about them, is because they're not really truly a metal band per se. They are influential on so many bands, not just in the metal genre, but I mean, we're going to be doing our big 4 on covers later in the episode, and you see just, you know, how many people covered them, how many people were inspired by them, and it's incredible. They're a landmark band for many, many reasons. And, you know, the least of which is just that they inspired the metal bands that we love.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many guitarists, from Paul Stanley to Slash in some cases, to Kirk Hammett talks about them from. I mean, I forgot which fan can that Metallica released. They're just jamming in the studio. And I don't even know, I wouldn't even consider what they were doing jamming so much as they were literally just hanging out in the studio, recording their album. And on downtime, they were just literally, Lars would throw in a drum beat, or Kirk or James would just start a guitar riff, and it would all, you know, sound or not sound, it would all just revolve around Led Zeppelin riffs or Led Zeppelin, you know, drum patterns. It was the most interesting thing to hear because it was like being a fly on the wall. But yeah, they did a bunch of stuff off of like physical graffiti, stuff like that. It was weird, but yeah, lots and lots of artists are so influenced by them.
I mean, you think about like bands like Badlands, think about bands like Great White, you know, even bands like Red Hot Chili Peppers. I mean, think about the influence that they would have on that end of the spectrum, you know. Modern bands like, obviously, Greta Van Fleet takes, you know, a lot of inspiration from Led Zeppelin. But yeah, I mean, there's just so many bands that we love that have either covered them or just expressed how much they're inspired by Led Zeppelin.
And you know, the sad part about everything is it wasn't just the passing of John Bonham as well. I mean, if you think about it, they hadn't released new music for a year or so. I think it was. I think they had released Presence towards the end of the 70s, and John died in 1980, right around similar time to Bon Scott from AC/DC. And they were kind of in between, like a hiatus almost. You know, they had ups and downs, especially in the late 70s, where it came to the kind of music they were trying to put out. It wasn't as ferocious as the early stuff, but it was so much more complex and um, artistic. I guess you could say. Still, in some cases, still heavy. In other cases, it was just as light as the stuff that they did, like on Led Zeppelin 3. So they were still doing their thing, but the music was just slightly different. And they were going through different periods towards the end of their career. So,
In the last couple of years, there were some. I mean, John Bonham had started to really have trouble because of his drug use. I think it was in Germany he passed out at a show, and they like basically cancel multiple uh, performances, and it's just it's unfortunate when that happens, but there's nobody else that really. It's not like they're going to kick John Bonham out and then replace him. There's no replacing a guy like John Bonham. So I think this is one of those instances where if anybody is gone from the band, it's pretty much over. And
right,
that's what
that's exactly what they did. He died in September of 1980, where Bond died in February. So it was the same year, but it just as impactful on both bands. AC/DC chose to continue, whereas Led Zeppelin felt that there was no replacing John Bonham. So, hey, I agree. I mean, you have that kind of drummer. The thing is that there was a chemistry between those four guys that is unrivaled in music. Because you can get, you have Jagger Richards, you've got Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. They have that chemistry. They're songwriters, they're musicians, but Led Zeppelin was those four guys. And without one of those four guys, it wasn't Led Zeppelin.
Yep.
And they were true. Like, nowadays everybody replaces everybody. Stryper used to tout for forever that they were still the original band. That they never had a member change, even though Tim Gaines went in and out of the band a couple times.
Yeah, I was gonna say Tim Gaines was in and out of the band so many times. I don't think he recorded on multiple albums. So to say, "Oh, we were always the original band," like that's a little misleading.
Right, but I don't think, as far as I understand, I don't think they toured with a different bass player at any point until recently.
Yeah, maybe that's true.
So it's just one of those things. Led Zeppelin stayed true to their word. And that was it. Now they did do a couple reunion shows, but that's because there was a demand to see them, and they caved. And in one performance they had Phil Collins, and for the most part, since then it's always been Jason, John's son, Jason Bonham. So the Phil Collins thing, that was Live Aid, and that was absolutely amazing. So, although they did play the riff to a Whole Lot of Love backwards. That was the weirdest thing. I'm listening to the song, I'm like, that doesn't sound like a Whole Lot of Love, but that's what they're doing. I was like, huh, okay. Hey, that's their choice to play the riff backwards. But whatever. Anyway, we're here to rank their albums worst to first instead of just jibber jabbering about them. So if you guys haven't heard worst to first before, we're basically going to go down each position and we're going to give what we think is that album's position. So for instance, with Led Zeppelin, we're doing 9 albums. So we're going to start, myself will say what album number 9 is, then Chris will say what his number 9 is, and we'll just go down up to number 1 from there. So, all right. I think you've been starting a lot lately, so I'm going to go ahead and start this one. How about that?
I started on the Black Sabbath one, so go ahead.
Oh, thank you. All right. Number 9. This is a short list, but man, what good albums. This is almost hard to say. Because like you sit there and say, oh, well, number 5 album is this or number 2 album is that. And it's like the difference between one and the next is minuscule. However, there has to be one at number 9. And we're going to include Coda in this list of 9 because even though it came out after the band had broken up, it is a collection of songs that were previously unreleased. I think except for one song, and even that song itself was a different version. So um, we included it because hell, we needed another album to make this a little bit longer show.
Well, I mean, it is a not beyond a compilation.
Right.
It is exclusively. I mean, the songs are exclusively on that album, so
Correct.
it counts.
Okay. Anyway, number 9 for me is going to be Coda. It's not like it's a bad album. They had some really interesting tracks on that album, but I felt as far as the music was concerned, I mean, there's a reason why a lot of those tracks were left off to begin with. Although it did have some pretty cool tracks on it in general. I mean, I liked Darlene. I liked Poor Tom. Ozone Baby was good. The one weird one for me was Bonzo's Montreux. Uh, they can sit there and say all they want about the fact that that is was a newer recording or whatever you want to call it. I know it was put together by Jimmy, but there are some clips that sound directly like it came from Moby Dick, and so. But I'm just going to leave that at that. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right, and I just didn't never read about the fact that they used clips from Moby Dick. I don't know.
I don't know about that, but am in agreement with you that Coda is my number 9. I like Darlene, Ozone Baby, and my favorite song off of that album is Wearing and Tearing. I think that's definitely the strongest song for me. It's pretty much all the reasons you said. I mean, this is some leftover stuff, and it's a pin in their career basically. But it's still decent. Like even though it's leftover stuff, and in the same in some respects, that's what Physical Graffiti was leftover stuff from other sessions. But then multiple occasions they proved that like even their leftovers are better than what some other bands put out. So
Yeah,
uh,
their discarded tracks are better than some people's platinum albums.
exactly. So yeah, it doesn't mean it's a bad album by any means. It just has less on it that I really love. So
All right. So what is your number 8?
my number 8 is Presence. Achilles' Last Stand, definitely my favorite song on that album. Nobody's Fault But My Own, Candy Store Rock, they're all great. And I really like the vibe of the album. Like it plays out a little bit differently musically than some of the stuff that came before it. And it is still a strong album, but like when I think of Presence, I kind of struggle to remember what's on the album other than Achilles' Last Stand. Like to me, that's the song that's synonymous with the album, and I always remember that one. But Presence, I think for me is just that album that like when I really look at it, it's just not as memorable as some of the other stuff that they put out.
And I agree with you, and that's why it's also my number 8.
Oh wow.
Um, for me, I mean, I like Achilles' Last Stand. Um, as I was mentioning to you before we started recording, For Your Life, that riff for whatever reason is an earworm to me, and every time I hear the song or think, see the name and I think about the song, it's a riff I cannot get out of my head for hours upon hours, and it's so unusual. And the same thing goes for Nobody's Fault But Mine. That's one that those two tracks get stuck in my head for a long time. But I like those songs. Candy Store Rock is a pretty interesting song as well. But for me, this album's the biggest ones for me are Achilles' Last Stand, Nobody's Fault, or Nobody's Fault But Mine, and For Your Life. That's where I stand on that album. All right.
Okay.
So number 7 for me is going to be In Through the Outdoor. That one, basically the final album that Led Zeppelin released and before Bonzo's death, and I got to say, that was, there was so much going on in the camp at that time, and I think, between all the drug use and all the substance abuse that was going on with the band, one particular person that kind of made his presence known was John Paul Jones, and it shows in a lot of the songs on this album where he was critical, in funny, critically in his presence, because he was front and center in a lot of stuff, and I think that was mostly due to the fact that Jimmy Page was just kind of out there and doing his thing. My songs in this one, "In the Evening" is a great song. "Fool in the Rain" is an awesome song, but when it comes down to it, "All of My Love" is an absolute masterpiece of a song, in my opinion. I know it's a very quiet, almost somberish kind of song, but I must say that keyboard solo in that song is got to be the most memorable solo that I can remember of any song that I know. I love that solo. I know there's a little bit of a Jimmy Page at the end, when the keyboards go off and Jimmy Page comes and does some guitar stuff, but it's that part with John Paul Jones that just is masterful. I love that song.
So this is unprecedented. And Through the Outdoor is also my number 7. So for me, the highlights are "Fool in the Rain" and, of course, like you said, "All of My Love." It's a super memorable song. I feel like I've seen it or used in multiple things. I wish I could remember what, but yeah, like that song. I remember hearing it on the radio all the time growing up. Just it's one of those that, like, you're right. It is kind of quiet. It's reflective in a way, and it just has this mood to it that just catches you. Like you can't not listen to it. Um, yeah. Other than that, like I feel like, yeah, they're kind of at the end of their career, or in a way where they're not as cohesive anymore, or other things are taking their attention, and it's just there's some other good stuff on there, but for the most part, it's it's just more filler. And even the filler is good. I can listen to this album pretty much the whole way through and enjoy it. But when you think of the album, like, it for me, it's "All of My Love" is the song that stands out, the one you think of.
Yeah, for sure. It's just an incredible song to me.
All right, so my number 6 is Led Zeppelin 3. Um, Immigrant Song, what an amazing song. I think a new generation was exposed to it through Thor, um, the not the most recent one, but the third movie. Um, and then there's Gallows
It
Pole.
was Thor Ragnarok, I think it
Yeah,
was.
that's the third one. Yeah. Um, Gallows Pole, Celebration Day. I love the song Tangerine. It's such a good song. But Immigrant Song, on that merit alone, puts it above the other songs. I mean, the other albums that I've listed on my list. Um, it's almost strong enough that it almost put it above something else for me. But overall, when I really thought about it, like, there are other albums that I thought, like, okay, this one has, two songs that I just love. So it kind of just on that, it kind of dropped it down a little bit. The thing I don't like about Led Zeppelin 3 as much as others is it is a bit more of like a soft album. It has a lot more, softer tracks. It has, um, it's just there's nothing on it other than Immigrant Song that just gets me, like, jazzed and excited, you know? So it just for me, it doesn't stand up as well as some of the other stuff, where, like, there's other albums where even though they have some softer stuff, then they have these, not headbangers, but more like rockers, you know? And I just don't feel that about Led Zeppelin 3. I often kind of think it like sits lower, but I was like, nah, I mean, I think 6 is fine for me.
Well, that's also my number 6.
No freaking way.
Oh yeah, that is it right there. Number 6, Led Zeppelin 3. Um, for me, I want to say my early teens, my early teens through middle of high school, probably junior year. I really dismissed this album as the Immigrant Song plus 9 other songs or whatever it was. I did not ever give it a chance until my best friend in high school, 11th grade, mostly senior year, his name is George. He turned me on to Gallows Pole. And he was talking about one, the dynamics of the song, two, the structure and how they build with each family member that they go through in the song. If you know the lyrics, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And well, not just family members, but like, there was brother, I think there was friends, sister, brother, something like that, right? And anyhow, so he turned me on to that song, and I find that song absolutely fascinating. I love that song. So much so that is my favorite Led Zeppelin song, and that was documented in the Greatest Hits episode. Um, I love the Immigrant Song. I love the quirky intro where you hear this pounding, dum, 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 and then it goes into the song. I always thought that was just a mistake on my CD, but that's just the way the song is. I like Out on the Tiles. That's a great song. I mean, if after that, after Immigrant Song, I think Out on the Tiles is the next big rocker on this album. But
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
For me, Gallows Pole is just absolutely stunning. Just the whole build of that song and the structure is just outstanding. So that's my number 6 album, Led Zeppelin 3. Okay, hopefully there's some change in the top 5 between you and I. All right, so we're going to number 5 for me, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be different for you. Number 5 for me is Physical Graffiti. Physical Graffiti, I'm not, and I don't want this. I don't want this to sound bad, but Physical Graffiti to me is like too much, and especially when with a band like Zeppelin that doesn't do very long songs on a record, except for a few here and there. Stairway to Heaven is an example of that, but they have a lot of shorter songs, and so there's a lot of songs on Physical Graffiti, and it's a lot to take in. Okay, it's a double album, So what ended up happening for me is like, for me, certain songs get lost. It's I don't know. I don't know how to put it. They got a ton of great songs on here. I mean, I love Custard Pie, The Rover, Houses of the Holy, Trampled Underfoot, Cashmere. The Wonton song. There's a lot of really good songs in here, but for whatever reason, they don't grab me like all in one spot. I don't know. Maybe I'm just crazy thinking about it that way because it is such a good album. And then again, it is number 5 and there's 4 other albums ahead of it. So it's just one of those things that I don't pick it up as often as maybe I should. I don't know. That's me.
Okay. It is our first different album. So my number 5 is Led Zeppelin, the first album.
Wow.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I love Good Times, Bad Times, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, Dazed and Confused, Communication Breakdown. To me, the standouts are Good Times, Bad Time, and Communication Breakdown. Like those, I put above everything else. But it is one of the bluesiest albums, and I've never been as much into the bluesy stuff, even though their entire career is bluesy. Don't get me wrong. But I just some of the stuff that came later that's more rock oriented, I enjoy more. So this one, I'll put it on, but instinctively sometimes I skip it and go to the next album or the ones after that. So, yeah, it sounds crazy, but yeah, it's at number 5 for me.
You're insane. How could that be?
Likewise.
All right, what do you got for number 4?
My number 4 is Houses of the Holy. Um, Highlights for me are Over the Hills and Far Away. I always struggle with this one. Jamaica or Jamaica, right? Um, it looks like Dire Maker on the album. And then The Ocean. I love The Ocean. Great song. Also love The Song Remains the Same and Dancing Days. Overall, like for the most part, I can listen to this album all the way through and just really enjoy it. Um, but that being said, it still sits at number 4. I think there's 3 albums that I enjoy even more.
And think about that. I mean, the remaining 3 albums for you are pretty strong. So, um,
Yes.
oddly enough, my number 4 album is Houses of the Holy. um,
That's crazy.
for the most part, it's the same as you. I mean, I love Over the Hills and Far Away. The Crunge is an interesting song for me. I like Dancing Days. Jamaica, I like that song. That's a cool song. No Quarter. I know it's a big song in Led Zeppelin lore, if you want to put it that way. That song in No Rain.
Oh,
That's
different band.
exactly that song, No Quarter, and the Rain song. Those are just 2 songs. I mean, I guess when I was younger, I was a lot heavier metalhead when I was younger than I am now. But those 2 songs just never kind of grasped me. I know what they are. I know what song, how they're structured. I know the songs. If I heard them, I know that's No Quarter. I know that's the Rain song, but it's not something that I listen to very often, just because it's not my style. For what it's worth, but The Ocean is a killer song. Love that song. Just
Yeah,
the
sure.
drumming on that song is outstanding. Um, and Over the Hills and Far Away. I said I like that song before. One song from Stone Temple Pilots reminds me of that song. I think it's "Tripping in a Hole in a Paper Heart." I think is the name of the song. Um, for some reason, there's something about that song that reminds me of Over the Hills and Far Away. Maybe it's because they both have really long song titles. I don't know,
Could be.
but that's it. All right. Number 3 for me is the untitled 4th album from Led Zeppelin. Um, I mean, what else can you say other than the fact it has the most played song in music history in many people's opinion, "Stairway to Heaven." Um, and then it also has rock and roll. It has Black Dog. It has the Battle of Evermore, Misty Mountain Hop, When the Levee Breaks, 4-6, Going to California. It's only got 8 songs. It's absolutely an amazing, amazing album. Um, and oddly enough, it's number 3 for me because I actually like the other 2 albums more. Um, although I was listening to this today and I'm like, man, number 3? But yeah, number 3 for me.
I'm a little surprised, but you know, it is a case of like all these albums are so good. It's sometimes surprising to us where it ends up. Um, but my number 3 is Led Zeppelin 2. Um, Whole Lot of Love, Heartbreaker, Ramble On, amazing songs. Especially Whole Lot of Love and Heartbreaker. Those to me just the absolute standouts on that album. This was the first one that I owned and probably had for a little while before anything else I could find. And it just like every time I listen to it, I get those kind of nostalgic feelings of the days when you ordered out of I always forget the name of that
Columbia House.
there you go, Columbia House. And that's how I got this one. Um and I just remember. I remember seeing the cover of the album. This is kind of funny. Um, I remember seeing the cover of the album where it's got like I guess the band in with a bunch of like
Pilots.
I guess they're pilots or something. Yeah, something. And I was like, man, there's a lot of members of Led Zeppelin. I was pretty young. Like I had to have been 6, 7 years old. Um, and it's amazing to me that Led Zeppelin 2 for me can sit it at the third ranking. But again, two more albums I like even more.
Well, there you go. All right. So what's your number two?
My number 2, I think, was your number 5, Physical Graffiti. Um, you have a fair argument saying there's a lot of stuff there because isn't there 15 songs on the original release?
Something
Uh,
like that.
and it is leftovers from previous sessions. But yeah, Custard Pie, Houses of the Holy, Trampled Underfoot, Kashmir, Down by the Seaside, the Wonton Song. Um, I love all of those songs. And, to say like 7 out of 15 are songs you love, that to me is saying a lot. And then there, like, Kashmir is just a certifiable like classic. I know we love the Wonton song. Like, I think I kind of got you in on that one. Down by the Seaside, amazing song. Absolutely love it. So for me, even though there's a lot of material there, I still really enjoy it. Like from beginning to end, it's really fun to listen to. And the standouts are that strong that I put it above everything else there.
Oh, don't get me wrong, because like I said, the difference between 1 and 9 is still minuscule.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it's crazy to think how
Well,
good these albums are. You know,
yeah.
I mean, yes, there's a bigger separation from 8 through to 9, right?
Mhm.
But and in 7 and 8, they're definitely farther away. But when you get from Led Zeppelin 3 at number 6, and you're going all the way up. I mean, it's really close because there's so much good stuff on there. I
Yeah.
mean, you
And it
think
becomes a
about it,
matter of preference because
right?
there are some little stylistic differences.
Exactly, because if you think about the fact that every single one of these albums went platinum, okay, anything that they do goes platinum basically. And if you want to look at the fact that Presence only sold 3 million copies
Only.
only, right? I mean, Into the Outdoor. So you think that their career is tanking, right? 3 years after they release, more than 3 years, because there was the summer that they released in March 1976. They released Presence, and then August of '79. So it's over 3 years that they haven't released any new music, and they come out with Into the Outdoor, and from people who have heard Presence, so all of a sudden, they get to hear Into the Outdoor, and it's like, whoa, and then plus the other thing too was the promotion that was behind it. 3 different covers, garbage bag on, the paper bag, not garbage bag, the brown paper bag on the front where you didn't know which cover you were getting. I mean, genius marketing. Okay. Because
Yeah, I
all they
didn't
have,
remember the garbage bag.
no, it's just, well, you think about it, right? They didn't have plastic wrap around it. They just literally had the brown paper bag, and the
Mhm.
plastic wrap was around the inside of the, not inside of the record, but it wrapped the actual like album, where the paper bag was just an outer sleeve that I still have, by the way.
Oh, nice.
But it's just pretty cool. Genius marketing, and then to come out with what they came out with in Through the Outdoor, and all, like I said, it was carried by All of My Love. That's insane. I mean, that sold 6 million copies. From there, you think about it, Led Zeppelin 3 also sold 6 million, and Led Zeppelin 1 sold 8. Everything else is more than 10 million. That's nuts
That's
when you
insane.
think about it. I mean, all those triple platinum is your worst album of your career. That's, I'll take that any day of the week, but I didn't. I wasn't a musician. So these albums are incredible. So, between 1 and 5 and 6 and 8 it's all just minute details. So number 2 for me is going to be the premiere album, the debut, Led Zeppelin, or Led Zeppelin 1, as many people know it. It's got a lot of stuff on there that is just really good. I mean, you introduce the world to who Led Zeppelin is with Good Times, Bad Times, and you listen to that incredible drum work that John Bonham is doing on that song. Then you slow it down to Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You. You literally go acoustic. Then you go heavy blues on You Shook Me. And then you go even slower with Dazed and Confused. I mean, you're at this point, you're just melting your mind away. And then side 2, Your Time Is Gonna Come, Black Mountain Side, a little guitar thing. And then Communication Breakdown just hits in the middle of side 2. It's like, where did that song come from? It's like, whoa. And back to the blues. I Can't Quit You, Babe. It's a blues album, and I know you're not a big blues guy, but for me, I really enjoy this record because it has so many. I think the mellowness of this album in general is what attracts me to it. And I, from time to time, I can get into blues where I just sit there and say, I want to hear the blues today, and this would be something I would choose. But again, the strength of Good Times, Bad Times, and Communication Breakdown is outstanding. I love How Many More Times. That's a really cool song, and Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You is outstanding. So Led Zeppelin 1 is my number 2 album. All right, so number 1 for me, it was your number 3 album, Led Zeppelin 2. That for me, it's weird. So I was going to say earlier that that this was a toss up between the untitled 4th album and this Led Zeppelin 2. But where did I put the untitled 4th album? I put it 3rd, right? Because when I started looking at Led Zeppelin, I'm like, well, this shit's really good, and I really, as much as I like the untitled album, side 2 doesn't do it for me as much as side 1. And I think I enjoy other songs more. So that's kind of why I dropped it down. But anyhow, number 1 for me, Led Zeppelin 2, you kind of went over it a little bit before, but the songs on there are, just incredible as far as just the presence that they still have to this day. Whole Lot of Love. What Is What Should Never Be, the Lemon Song, Thank You, Heartbreaker, Live and Love and Made. You can never not hear those 2 songs together. So if any radio station ever plays just Heartbreaker, you call them up and you want that DJ fired or the program director fired, because those 2 songs have to go together. Ramble On is a really cool song. Moby Dick, that just highlighted John Bonham and his amazing drum work. And Bring It On Home, I know you're not a big fan of that song. I love that song. I just love how once it goes through the racist intro, it turns into a really good song. And I
past the racism. It's not really racist, right? It's
just mocking the original artist of the song. It's just funny. I wouldn't even say they're mocking it, because the one thing I will say, Led Zeppelin has truly honored and stolen from their idols. And it's so weird to say it that way, but they did. If Jimmy Page says I wrote the song, most likely he didn't. And I'm not trying to knock Led Zeppelin. They have been accused of lifting riffs, patterns, whole songs from older blues artists. They have gone back and have corrected a lot of the songwriting and have changed the publishing to a lot of the songs because of being called out for choosing to just leave off certain artists' names that actually created or wrote the original riff.
That happened in the music industry
Oh,
so much back.
it
And it still
happens
happens
all the time, all the time. But these were so obvious that it was like, "Hey, come on, dude." And so they went back and they changed it. But again, like I said, they honored them in that way to include them in their music. But this album for me is just outstanding. I mean, Whole Lot of Love, dude. I mean, the things about that song, the riff, and then just the backwards echo or the reverse echo, however you want to call it. That's incredible stuff. This is 1969, the second album that they released that year. Um, you know, Thank You, incredible song, beautiful song. My first real serious girlfriend that I had in high school. Um, Second girlfriend that I had long term, but she was the first serious one that I had multiple years that I was dating. She dedicated that song to me, and so I'll always remember that song. It's an outstanding song. Duran Duran did a killer version of that song, and I don't like Duran Duran much, but that was still a pretty good version. Who else did a good version? Tesla. Tesla did a good version on their Reel to Reels, and we're going to talk about some cover songs in a little bit, but Thank You is a great song. And like I said before, Heartbreaker, Live and Love and Made, come on. Anyway, what's your number one album?
If you didn't decipher it from every other album being really listed, my number one is the Untitled Fourth Album. It's a little cliche, but it's cliche for a reason because it's that damn good. Black Dog is one of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs, period. Rock and Roll, Battle of Evermore, Stairway to Heaven, absolute classic. I probably never need to hear it again in my life, but still love the song. Misty Mountain Hop. I love Four Sticks. When the Levy Breaks. So, I still like the second half of the album. I think there's only one song, Going to California, that it's just not my absolute cup of tea, but I don't skip it when I'm listening to the album in its full entirety. But 7 out of 8 being just absolute classics to me. Definitely the ratio there is putting it above everything else. Um, it's amazing to me, like when you think about it, like there's really only 12 years that they were together, and they put out simply 8 albums of just absolute classics. Um, you know, Obviously the different, like you said earlier, the difference between number 1 and 9, it's there. It's it's undeniable. But you can find at least one song on every album that is just an absolute classic.
I agree with you on that. I mean, there's stuff on Coda that's just it's outstanding. And now, if you go get Coda now, they actually include "Hey Hey What Can I Do" and "Traveling Riverside Blues," which were two songs that were released in the 70s that didn't make it onto any album, but they were radio hits.
Mhm.
And now, for years you couldn't get those, and then when the box sets came out in the 90s, they were included. And so, of course, people were just clamoring like crazy to get those box sets because it's like, oh, they have those songs finally, on CD. And then when they re-released the albums, and I think it was they finished off the box set, they added one of those two songs, and then they threw in a couple of extra bonus tracks, and then they released the complete recordings, which was a gray rock-looking box set. It was that had everything on it, or it was complete studio recordings. And it had all those, and they included "Traveling Riverside Blues" and "Hey Hey What Can I Do" on Coda, and then now on the remasters that Jimmy Page did several years ago in the 2010s, in the teens. They redid the packaging of those and they included all those songs. So Coda has great songs on it. And to think it's our number 9,
Mm,
I mean, it doesn't have a whole lot of love. It doesn't have Stairway to Heaven on it, but shit, it's still a good album.
for sure.
And that was one thing I wanted to mention as I started saying the remasters so of course they remastered the album, the box sets. That was the first remasters. Then they put out the complete studio recordings as a big giant box set. So a few years ago, I think it started in 2015. I'm not exactly sure. Maybe it was 2010 or 2012. I can't remember, but in the 2010s, and they had a reissue program. I think it was 3 albums every quarter or something like that, or every 6 months. I can't remember, until they finished all 10 albums. And I say 10 because I'm including the live album, Song Remains the Same. And they put them all out with digipack packaging, and they put out Led Zeppelin 3 with the wheel. Led Zeppelin 2 was the gatefold. Physical graffiti, you slide it out, and it had the apartment pictures on it. It was so cool. They reissued them just like the albums came out in the 70s. So it was really neat. The sound is amazing on them all. So that Jimmy Page has always been very meticulous with the sound of Led Zeppelin. So that is for anybody out there, get those albums. And then they have a second disc on each of those albums with a bunch of outtakes. And there's one outtake for every song on the album, which is pretty cool.
That is cool. I really only in the recent years have listened to any of that stuff because I had sold all my CDs, and so everything that I listen to now is essentially digital. So catching up on some of the remasters, etc.
Come on, catch up. I'll wait for you. All right. Well, now it is time for the Big Four, and today's Big Four is Led Zeppelin cover songs. So it's bands that have covered Led Zeppelin songs, and I don't know who. I think I'll go
first last.
You
So
went
go
first
ahead
last time. All right, I'm going to go first. Okay, I will go first. Stop pulling my leg. All right. Number 4 for me is Communication Breakdown by Iron Maiden. It was the B-side to the Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter single, and it was definitely an interesting take, a little bit quicker than the original. The original was kind of quick, and it had. Personally, I think it was left over from the Somewhere in Time sessions. That's the way it sounds to me, because they had that very keyboardy sounding guitar. Because if I'm not mistaken, No Prayer for the Dying, they kind of stripped the sound back down. And on Communication Breakdown, it has that echoey kind of keyboardy sounding guitar. That's just me. I think I could be wrong. All right.
Wrong.
I'm probably wrong. Number 3, Good Times, Bad Times from Godsmack, off of their Good Times, Bad Times, 10 Years of Godsmack, the greatest hits album that they released. That was basically the lead single for you to buy the greatest hits album. It's a really good version, very, very true to the original. It's just Godsmack makes it sound that much heavier. I know Godsmack's your favorite band, so I'll get you a copy for Christmas.
Absolute favorite.
Number 2 for me is Out on the Tiles by Blind Melon, and that's from the Encomium tribute to Led Zeppelin. That's just a killer version. I love the way they played it. I mean, very true to the original. But the drummer in Blind Melon is an outstanding drummer, and I've always liked his sound and the way he played, and so I like this version. And number 1 for me, this may or may not seem strange to some folks, but it is Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You from Great White, the version that was played on MTV Unplugged. It was later released on their greatest hits. It made Unplugged. I mean, that was one of the songs and one of the shows that Unplugged just blew, the roof off of. It was outstanding. It basically gave that song new life. It gave Great White a continued life on their career. It was an absolutely outstanding version, to the point that they went ahead and they actually released later on a couple of different albums as tributes to Led Zeppelin. They recorded songs live in concert. They basically played like Led Zeppelin concert. So that was pretty cool.
All right.
All right,
Well,
what's your big four?
now we may have had a lot of crossover in our albums. We have 0 in our big four.
That's so rare.
Oh, that's not true. I'm completely wrong. We have 25% in our big four.
Oh, do we? We have one song. Okay.
One song. So my number 4 is Friends by Stone. Stone is a band we need to talk about. And I mentioned to you to listen to their first couple albums. Stone is super influential in the Scandinavian scene. A lot of bands, cite them as a inspiration into kind of like creating, say, even the Gothenburg sound and some other genres of death metal. Awesome band, and their version of Friends. It's so unique and so different, but still is the same song. Like it carries the soul of the song, but still is their own version.
I have listened to Stone, by the way. After you told me to listen to them, I checked them out, and I remember looking at those album covers because I've seen those albums before. Listen to them, pretty cool, very interesting. We need to talk more about them.
Talk all about them for sure. My number 3 is The Ocean by Tesla. You had a different Tesla song. You had Thank You, correct?
I had mentioned it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Well, regardless, yeah, Tesla's version of The Ocean, really cool song, and I love that song to begin with. So it's one that really kind of stuck out to me. My number 2 is Rock and Roll from Van Halen from the Live Without a Net DVD or VHS if you had it or whatever other formats it came out on. I personally had the DVD. And it was the way they ended the concert, and it was just so cool because Sammy's voice just works so well to cover Robert Plant. Just really great version of the song, a lot of fun. And if you haven't seen the Live Without a Net performance, and you are a Van Halen fan, that is really one to check out. A lot of fun. And my number 1 is Communication Breakdown from Iron Maiden. Prior to us kind of talking about like what we were going to do as our big 4, this was one that I know and it is always in my mind. So it kind of stuck out to me, like, and Iron Maiden is one of, if not my favorite band. So it's hard for me not to pick a version that's this good. Bruce's voice is perfect for this song too.
So you don't think that the guitar sound was not something that was sounded like off of Seventh Son or somewhere? Probably a Seventh Son leftover.
It definitely sounds like the Seventh Son era. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, when they did No Prayer for the Dying, I mean, they literally stripped the guitars back down to what it used to be. It didn't have that reverby sound that they had done for those 2 albums in a row.
But you don't like that, but I do.
Yeah, I mean, the song is.
I love the distortion they used on those albums, so I'm good with it.
I'm okay with it. I mean, obviously, I enjoy both albums. I wish it was sounded different, but that's okay. That's just me. It's me.
I mean, you're talking to the guy who has Somewhere in Time as the number 2 album from Iron Maiden. So,
oh yeah, mine was down a little bit lower.
Yes.
All right. That is our big 4 Led Zeppelin cover songs. And that brings an end to this episode of Debating Metal.
To interact with us, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com. If you listen to us on YouTube, be sure to leave us a comment and ring that bell to be notified when we post a new episode. And remember to tune in next week when we spark up another exciting metal debate. On behalf of Kenneth and myself, stay safe and always turn it up to 11.
See ya.